The man in the hard hat was a fixture of my summer, as predictable as the sun beating down on the asphalt. For 3 months, my route as a medical courier took me down County Road 12, a stretch of pockmarked pavement the county had finally decided to resurface. And for 3 months, he was there, orchestrating the chaos of graders and steamrollers with an economy of motion that bordered on art. I didn't know his name. In my head, he was just the foreman. He was broad-shouldered and sun-darkened, with a face that seemed carved from the same stubborn rock they were crushing into gravel. I told myself my fascination was purely aesthetic, an appreciation for competence. It was a lie, of course, a flimsy shield against a loneliness so profound it had its own specific gravity. Every day, I would slow my small, air-conditioned sedan to a crawl, navigating the cones and the flaggers. And every day, I would watch him. He never seemed to sweat, not really. A fine sheen might glisten on his thick forearms or at his temples, but he moved through the humid Ohio haze with a dry, focused intensity. He'd point, a clean, decisive gesture. He'd speak into the radio clipped to his vest, his voice too low and gravelly to carry over the rumble of machinery. The other men on the crew, younger and louder, moved with a frantic energy, but he was their calm center. I memorized the way the faded blue of his work shirt stretched across his back, the worn denim of his jeans, the slight, thoughtful tilt of his head as he surveyed the work. It was a pathetic little ritual, my one-sided, 2-minute-a-day relationship. Then came the day it changed. It was a Tuesday in late August, the air thick enough to drink. I saw the familiar orange signs and slowed down, my eyes automatically searching for him. He was standing near the edge of the newly laid tar, talking to one of the flaggers. He glanced up as my car approached, and his eyes, which I'd never been close enough to see clearly, met mine through the windshield. They were a startlingly light color, maybe hazel or gray. He lifted a hand, not the usual lazy wave of the flaggers, but a sharp, specific gesture. "You. Stop." My heart gave a stupid, anxious thump. I rolled to a halt, my window already down, the smell of hot asphalt and diesel washing over me. He strode toward my car. The world seemed to narrow to the sound of his steel-toed boots crunching on loose gravel. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I ran through a mental checklist. Was I speeding? Did I cut someone off? Did a cooler fall off my passenger seat and into the work zone? He stopped beside my door, ducking his head to look inside. Up close, he was overwhelming. Taller than I'd thought. His face was all angles and sun creases, a light dusting of stubble along his jaw. The scent of him was sun, sweat, and something clean, like soap. "Morning," he said. His voice was exactly as I'd imagined. Low, a little rough around the edges, like worn leather. "Morning," I managed, my own voice sounding thin and reedy. He didn't smile, but the corners of his eyes crinkled slightly. "We're letting traffic through one more time before we close the lane for the paver. You can go on ahead." He pointed down the road with his thumb. "Oh, okay. Thanks." Relief and a ridiculous pang of disappointment warred in my chest. Of course, it was just about the traffic. I put the car in drive, my foot hovering over the accelerator. But he didn't move. He just stood there, one hand resting on the roof of my car, his gaze steady. "Listen," he said, his voice dropping even lower, as if sharing a secret. "My break's in about 10 minutes. Would you mind waiting for me? Just over there." He nodded toward a gravel turnout 100 yards past the construction zone. The question hung in the hot, still air. It made no sense. My brain stuttered, trying to find a logical reason. Maybe he needed a ride. Maybe his truck broke down. Maybe he thought I was someone else. My mouth went dry. "Wait for you." "Yeah, if you've got a minute." "I won't be long. I am not a person who does spontaneous things. My life is a series of carefully planned routes and predictable outcomes." But I heard myself say, "Okay, just okay." He gave a short, single nod, as if I'd just confirmed a complex logistical detail. "Appreciated." He slapped the roof of my car twice, a light, percussive sound, and stepped back. I drove forward, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I pulled into the turnout, switched off the engine, and watched him in the rearview mirror as he turned and walked back into the heart of the noise and the heat. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat in the silent car, the air conditioning a feeble defense against the anxiety radiating from my skin. I watched him. He moved with the same unhurried purpose, speaking to his crew, checking a set of plans, his presence a solid, grounding force amidst the mechanical clamor. I tried to dissect his request, turning it over and over like a strange stone. It was probably nothing. He probably needed me to run an errand, to pick up a part from the auto store in the next town. That had to be it. It was a practical request from a practical man. The fact that my stomach was doing slow, lazy flips was my own problem, a product of my overactive imagination and chronic solitude. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was a mess, my face was pale. I looked like what I was, a man who spent 8 hours a day in a car talking only to dispatch. I suddenly felt intensely self-conscious, as if he could see right through the metal and glass and into the messy, hopeful, terrified core of me. He looked at his watch, said something to another man, and then started walking toward me. The journey of 100 yards seemed to take an eternity. Each crunch of his boots on the gravel was a drumbeat counting down to what? I rolled down the passenger window, a preemptive offering. He reached the car and leaned down, resting his forearms on the open window frame. His proximity was dizzying. I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the flecks of gold in their hazel depths. A faint, white scar cut through one of his eyebrows. His arm was inches from my shoulder, the sun-bleached hair on his skin catching the light. I could feel the heat coming off him. "Thanks for waiting," he said. "No problem." I cleared my throat. "Is everything all right? Do you need a ride somewhere?" He shook his head, a small, slow movement. "No, I see you drive by every day." My heart did something complicated. It felt like it dropped and soared at the same time. He sees me. "It's my route," I said, stating the obvious because it was the only thing I could think of. "Right." The courier car, he glanced at the passenger seat where my insulated cooler bag Saturday. I figured a silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant growl of the grater. It wasn't an awkward silence, not really. It felt weighted. He wasn't looking at me, but out at the heat shimmering off the road ahead. "My name's Marcus," he said, finally turning his gaze back to me. "Leo," I replied. "Leo," he repeated, testing the name. It sounded different in his voice. Solid. Real. "Look, this is probably weird." "Yes," my brain screamed. "Thank you for acknowledging it." "I was just wondering." He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. It was the first hint of uncertainty I had ever seen from him, and it was disarmingly human. "My truck's been acting up. The fuel pump, I think. I was going to try and get it to the garage in Plain City after work, but I'm not sure it'll make it. I was wondering if you'd be willing to follow me, just in case it dies on the road." It was so simple, so practical. A wave of relief, so potent it almost made me laugh, washed over me. Of course, he needed help. I was a reliable stranger in a reliable car. That was all. "Yeah, of course," I said, maybe a little too quickly. "My last drop-off is just outside of town. I can definitely do that. What time do you finish?" "We wrap at 5. "Okay, I can be back here by then." "You sure it's not out of your way?" "Not at all." I lied. My route finished 30 miles in the other direction. He seemed to study my face for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gave that same short nod. "Okay, I owe you 1 inch." He pushed himself off the car. "See you at 5, Leo." He turned and walked away without a backward glance. I watched him until he was just a figure in a blue shirt again, swallowed by the work. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking slightly. It was nothing. It was just a favor. But as I pulled back onto the highway, I knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that it wasn't nothing at all. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of clinics and labs, of familiar roads and autopilot driving. My mind wasn't on the samples in their temperature-controlled bags. It was on the man with hazel eyes and a voice like gravel. I replayed our brief conversation, analyzing every word, every pause. The way he said my name, the way he rubbed the back of his neck. These were the scraps I lived on, the meager bits of human interaction I would hoard and examine for weeks. But this felt different. This had a follow-up, a 5 o'clock appointment. I was back at the turnout at 4:55. The road crew was packing up. The cacophony of the day was winding down into the rhythmic clank of tools being put away and the tired banter of men at the end of a long shift. I saw Marcus directing a water truck, his movements still efficient, but with a hint of weariness around the edges now. He saw my car, and lifted a hand in acknowledgement. A few minutes later, an old, slightly battered Ford Ranger pulled out from behind the construction vehicles and rumbled into the turnout next to me. Marcus killed the engine and got out. He'd taken off the hard hat and vest, and his hair was damp with sweat. He raked a hand through it, and I felt another one of those stupid, internal jolts. "Right on time," he said, walking over. "I'm a professional driver," I said, trying for a bit of humor. It came out flatter than I intended. He smiled, a genuine, tired smile this time. It changed his whole face, softening the hard lines. "Right. The garage is Miller's, just off the main drag in Plain City. You know it." "I do." "All right. Let's see if this old girl makes it." He got back in his truck, and I followed him onto the highway. The 15-minute drive was nerve-wracking. I stayed a few car lengths behind, my eyes glued to his taillights, my body tensed for the moment they might flicker and die. His truck sputtered a couple of times, letting out a puff of dark smoke, and each time my heart leaped into my throat. It was an absurdly protective feeling. It was as if, by sheer force of will, I could push his truck the last few miles to safety. He made it. He pulled into the garage lot, the truck coughing its way into a parking spot. I pulled in beside him. He got out and leaned against the driver's side door, looking at the truck with a mixture of affection and annoyance. "She made it," I said, getting out of my car. "Barely," he grunted. "Thanks again. Seriously, I would have been stuck on the side of 33-inch. He dug his wallet out of his back pocket. "Let me give you something for your gas." "Don't be ridiculous," I said immediately. "It was nothing." He paused, his hand on his wallet. "Well, let me buy you a beer then. Or dinner. There's a diner down the street." Here it was. The end of the transaction. A polite offer I was supposed to politely decline. We would part ways, and tomorrow he would be the foreman again, and I would be the anonymous courier. But I was so tired of being anonymous. "Okay," I said. The word surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. He looked at me, a flicker of something in his eyes, curiosity, maybe. "Okay, dinner would be nice," I clarified, my voice steadier than I felt. He smiled that slow smile again. "All right, dinner it is." The diner was a classic small-town spot, all worn vinyl booths and the smell of coffee and fried onions. We slid into a booth, the table between us feeling like a vast, empty space. The awkwardness I'd been holding at bay came rushing in. What were we supposed to talk about? Paving techniques? The logistical challenges of medical specimen transport. Marcus seemed to feel it too. He studied the menu with an intensity it didn't deserve. Finally, the waitress came, a woman with a beehive hairdo who called him honey and asked how his mom was doing. It was a small reminder that he had a life, a history in this town that I was a complete stranger to. We ordered burgers and coffee, and then there was silence. "So," Marcus said, breaking it. He folded his hands on the table. His hands were clean, but the lines were etched with dirt, and his knuckles were calloused. "A courier. That must be a lot of driving." "It is," I said. "Lots of podcasts. Lots of staring out the window." "You from around here?" "Columbus," I said. "I moved here for college and just never left. My family's back in Pennsylvania." "You live alone?" The question was direct, but his tone was just curious. "I do." I felt a blush creep up my neck. It felt like a confession. "Yes, I'm the lonely man you suspected I was." "Me too," he said quietly. "Bought my granddad's old place a few years back. Just me and a half-wild cat that shows up for food." The burgers arrived, saving me from having to respond. We ate in a comfortable quiet for a few minutes. I found myself watching his hands as he ate, the way he held his burger, the sureness of his grip. Everything about him was so solid, so grounded. I felt like a ghost in comparison. "It's a tough job," he said, gesturing vaguely with a French fry. "The road work. Hot in the summer, freezing in the winter. But I like it. Seeing something broken get fixed. There's a satisfaction in it." "I get that," I said. "My job is just loops. I drive the same loop every day. Nothing ever really changes." He looked at me, his gaze sharp and appraising. "You sound bored." It was so blunt it startled a laugh out of me. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," he admitted, a ghost of a smile on his face. "You always look like you're a million miles away when you drive past." The confession hung in the air again. He sees me. He's been watching me too. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. My carefully constructed wall of anonymity was crumbling. We finished eating, and he insisted on paying, overriding my protests with a firm look. As we walked out into the twilight, the air had cooled slightly. The world was awash in the soft, purple light of a summer evening. "Well," I said, stopping by my car. "I should probably." "Right." He stood there, his hands in his pockets. The easy confidence he wore like a second skin seemed to have deserted him. He looked almost shy. "Listen, Leo. The garage is going to call me tomorrow with an estimate. I might need a ride to pick up the truck in a day or 2 inch. Just let me know," I said. "You need my number?" He pulled out his phone. I recited the digits, and he tapped them in. He sent me a text. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The message said, "Marcus." Just his name. "There," he said. "Now you have mine too." Okay. We stood there for another long moment. I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff, and I didn't know if I wanted to step back or jump. "Drive safe," he said finally. "You too. Get home safe." He nodded, gave a small, almost imperceptible wave, and started walking down the street, presumably toward his grandfather's old house. I got in my car, my hands trembling again. I looked at the text on my phone. "Marcus." It felt like the most significant message I had ever received. The next day, I drove my route with a knot of anticipation in my stomach. The road crew was there, but Marcus wasn't. A younger man was directing traffic, someone with less certainty in his gestures. The whole operation seemed a little more chaotic without him. I felt a ridiculous sense of loss. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Truck won't be ready till Friday. You busy after work?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled over to the side of the road to type a reply, my fingers clumsy. "Not busy. What's up?" The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute. I held my breath. "I owe you that beer." "My place." 6. He sent an address. It was on a rural route a few miles outside of town. "See you then." I typed, my hands shaking so badly I had to correct 3 typos. Friday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the next 2 days in a state of suspended animation, my thoughts orbiting around a single point: a beer at Marcus's house. I changed my outfit 3 times before I left my apartment on Friday evening, finally settling on jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, hoping I looked casual and not like I was trying too hard, which was exactly what I was doing. His house was a small, white-clapboard farmhouse set back from the road, surrounded by cornfields. It was simple and unassuming, with a wide front porch and a big oak tree in the yard. His repaired truck was parked in the gravel driveway. As I pulled in, he came out onto the porch. He was wearing jeans and a dark green Henley, and he was holding 2 bottles of beer, beaded with condensation. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet evening air. "Glad you made it." "Hey." I got out of the car, feeling suddenly overdressed and out of place. The city felt a million miles away. Here, the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the rustle of corn stalks in the breeze. He handed me a beer. Our fingers brushed. It was a fleeting, insignificant contact, but it sent a jolt straight through me. His hand was warm and rough. "Porch is the best spot," he said, nodding toward 2 worn wooden rocking chairs. We sat down, the old wood groaning under our weight. A large, fluffy orange cat appeared from under one of the chairs, stretched, and then rubbed against Marcus's leg. "That the half-wild one?" I asked. "That's him. Mostly wild when the food bowl is empty." Marcus took a long pull from his beer. "So, how was the rest of your week without us holding you up?" "Quieter," I said. "Less organized." He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. "I'll tell the guys you said that. They think I'm a hard ass. You just seem focused." "Have to be. A lot can go wrong out there." He fell silent, looking out at the fields as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The silence was comfortable this time. We just sat, drinking our beers, listening to the world settle down for the night. "You know," he said after a while, his voice soft, "I didn't really think my truck was going to break down." I turned to look at him. My heart started that slow, heavy thudding again. "Oh." He kept his eyes on the horizon. "It's been sputtering a little. I probably could have made it to the garage. Or called a tow." He took another drink of beer, then finally turned his head to meet my gaze. His expression was serious, his hazel eyes searching my face. "I just wanted a reason to talk to you." The world stopped. The crickets, the breeze, my own breathing. Everything just paused. All the scenarios I had run through my head, all the logical, practical explanations. They all dissolved, leaving only this one impossible truth. I am here, in the present. My throat is tight. I can't seem to form a word. All I can do is look at him, at the earnest, vulnerable expression on the face of this man I had thought was made of stone. You've been driving that route since June, he continues, his voice a low rumble. I notice things. I notice you. The way you look out the window. The way you tap your fingers on the steering wheel when you're waiting. I wanted to know who you were. Me? The word comes out as a squeak. A faint smile touches his lips. Yeah, you, Leo. He sets his beer down on the porch railing with a soft clink. He shifts in his chair, turning his body more toward me. The space between us, once a safe distance, now feels charged, electric. He doesn't move any closer, but his presence fills the air. My mind is a blank slate. All the witty retorts, all the self-deprecating jokes I usually use as armor, they're all gone. There's only the warm evening, the scent of cut grass, and the intense focus of his gaze. You look at me a certain way, he says, his voice quiet but clear. When you drive by, I see it. Am I reading that wrong? This is the cliff. Right here. I can lie. I can laugh it off, make a joke, and retreat back into the safety of my anonymous life. We can finish our beers and I can drive away, and this will become just another story I tell myself, another missed connection. Or I can tell the truth. I take a breath. It feels like the first one I've taken all day. No, I say, my voice barely a whisper. You're not reading it wrong. The admission hangs between us, fragile and immense. Marcus's expression doesn't change, but I see a subtle softening in his eyes, a release of tension in his shoulders. He didn't know. He was taking a risk too. He reaches out, not quickly, but with a slow deliberation that gives me 1,000 years to pull away. He doesn't touch my face or my hand. He just gently closes his fingers around the neck of the beer bottle still resting in my lap. His knuckles press against my thigh through the denim. The touch is electric. It's a simple, grounding point of contact in a world that has just tilted on its axis. We sit like that for a long moment, his hand covering mine, the setting sun casting long shadows across the porch. I can feel the warmth of his skin, the solid strength in his grip. He's not holding me down. He's just there. A silent statement. I'm here with you. Slowly, he leans forward. I don't move. I can't. My entire being is focused on him, on the scent of his soap and the faint smell of beer on his breath. His face is so close now I can see the individual specks of gold in his eyes. He pauses, an inch away, giving me one last chance to say no, to turn away. I don't. He closes the remaining distance, and his lips touch mine. It's not a frantic, Hollywood kiss. It's quiet. It's soft. It's tentative at first, a question. His lips are firm and warm. There's the faint taste of beer and something that is just him. His stubble is a rough, pleasant friction against my skin. I let my eyes drift shut, and a sigh escapes me, a breath I've been holding for months, maybe years. That sound seems to be the answer he was looking for. He deepens the kiss, his other hand coming up to cup the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. His thumb strokes the sensitive skin behind my ear. It's not a kiss of passion, not yet. It's a kiss of recognition, of confirmation. It says, oh, there you are. I've been looking for you. My free hand comes up to rest on his arm, feeling the hard muscle beneath his shirt. He feels so solid, so real. This isn't a daydream. This is happening. The foreman, Marcus, is on his porch, kissing me as the sun goes down. The sheer, impossible reality of it is dizzying. When he finally pulls back, it's only a few inches. He rests his forehead against mine, his eyes still closed. I can feel his breath, warm and even, on my face. Okay, he murmurs, his voice thick. Okay, I breathe back. It's all that needs to be said. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birdsong and the smell of coffee. I was on Marcus's couch, a thick quilt tucked around me. For a disoriented moment, I had no idea where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The porch, the kiss, the hours we'd spent talking afterward, our voices low in the dark, sharing pieces of our lives until my eyelids grew heavy and he'd led me inside. Panic, cold and familiar, coiled in my gut. I sat up. The house was quiet. Had he left? Did he regret it? My mind, my old, treacherous friend, started supplying a dozen painful possibilities. It was a mistake, a drunken curiosity. He woke up this morning and wanted me gone. I swung my legs off the couch. My clothes were folded neatly on a nearby armchair. I was about to pull on my shirt when Marcus appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. He was already dressed in work jeans and a t-shirt, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He stopped when he saw I was awake. An awkward silence descended. My anxiety spiked. This was it. The moment he would politely ask me to leave. He walked over and handed me one of the mugs. His fingers didn't brush mine this time. He kept a careful distance. "Morning," he said, his voice neutral. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Morning," I mumbled into the mug. The coffee was black and strong. It scalded my tongue. He sat in the armchair across from me, sipping his own coffee, his gaze fixed on the floorboards. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the easy intimacy of the night before. I felt my hope, so new and fragile, begin to wither. I should just go, get dressed, thank him for the beer, and walk out of his life. It would be easier than waiting for the rejection. I took another sip of coffee, the bitter taste matching my mood. I was a fool. I woke up, Marcus said suddenly, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the silence. He was still looking at the floor. And for a second, I forgot you were here. And my first thought was disappointment. He finally lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes were clear and direct. There was no regret in them, only a deep, unnerving sincerity. "And then I remembered you were on the couch," he continued, and I felt relieved. Safe, even, which is a stupid word for a guy like me to use. But it's the only one that fits. The panic in my chest receded, replaced by a warmth that spread through me like the coffee. He wasn't pushing me away. He was just as uncertain as I was. He was processing. "I'm not good at this, Leo," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "Talking. Feelings. All of it. I'm good at building roads. I'm not good at it either," I admitted. "I'm good at overthinking things until they fall apart in my head." A small smile touched his lips. "So we're a hell of a pair." "Looks like it." He stood up and walked over to the couch. He didn't sit, just stood in front of me. He reached out and gently took the coffee mug from my hands, setting it on the end table. Then he took my hand. His palm was warm and calloused, engulfing mine completely. "Last night," he said, his voice low and steady. "That wasn't just the beer, and it wasn't a mistake." He squeezed my hand. A simple pressure, a reassurance. "I have to go to work," he said, "but I don't want you to leave. Not yet. Stick around, if you want. There's bacon in the fridge." And with that, he let go of my hand, grabbed his keys from the hook by the door, and left. I heard his truck start up and rumble down the driveway. I sat there on the couch, my hand still tingling where he'd held it. Stick around. 2 simple words that felt like a foundation being poured. I wasn't being dismissed. I was being invited to stay. I made bacon. I found the frying pan and the plates. I moved around his kitchen, a stranger in a suddenly familiar space. I ate at his small wooden table, the orange cat watching me with wary curiosity. It felt domestic. It felt terrifying. It felt right. When I drove my route later that day, everything looked different. The trees seemed greener, the sky bluer. When I got to the construction site on County Road 12, my heart was doing a nervous tap dance. There he was, the foreman, my foreman, Marcus. He was talking on his radio, his back to the road. One of the flaggers waved me through. As I drove past, Marcus turned, as if he'd sensed me. Our eyes met. He didn't smile or wave. He just held my gaze for a long moment. It was a private exchange in a public space, a silent acknowledgement that everything had changed. It was a promise. "I'll see you later." That evening, I didn't go back to my empty apartment in Columbus. I went back to the little white house surrounded by cornfields. Marcus was on the porch, a tired slump to his shoulders, his boots dusty. He looked up as I pulled in, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was a smile of relief, a smile that said I'd come back. "Hey," he said as I walked up the steps. "Hey," I replied. "You look tired." Long day, he leaned back in his rocking chair. But a good one. I sat down in the other chair, the wood groaning a familiar welcome. We didn't need to talk. The silence was full and comfortable, a shared space we were building together. He reached over, his hand finding mine in the twilight, his fingers lacing through mine. His grip was sure and steady. I looked at our joined hands, then out at the endless fields stretching toward the horizon. For months, I had been an observer, a man watching life through a pane of glass, convinced that connection was for other people. I'd built a life on predictable loops and quiet isolation. But a man had waved me down on the side of the road, and with one simple, uncertain request, had pulled me out of the loop and into the world. He hadn't fixed me. He'd just seen me. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I hadn't just arrived at a destination. I felt like I'd come home.